The champagne tasted like victory, but it was the look on his face that made it truly sweet. Across the boardroom table, David Marshall sat frozen, his signature arrogant smirk replaced by something I'd never seen before: genuine fear. The man who had once told me I wasn't executive material was now watching me sign the papers that would make me his new boss. "Congratulations, Miss Thompson," the lawyer said, sliding the final documents across the mahogany surface. "Nexus Industries is now officially a subsidiary of Phoenix Dynamics." I kept my expression neutral. Professional. But inside, every fiber of my being was screaming with triumph. 5 years. 5 years since David Marshall had crushed my dreams in a 15-minute interview that changed everything. 5 years since he'd looked at me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience, a resume to be discarded without a second thought. My name is Sophia Thompson, and this is the story of how I turned rejection into revolution. The memory of that day still burned as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. I was 26, fresh out of my MBA program at Northwestern, armed with academic honors and internship experiences that should have opened doors. Instead, I found myself sitting in the sterile waiting room of Marshall & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm that specialized in corporate restructuring. I had researched everything about the company, memorized their client list, studied their recent case studies. I knew their revenue streams, their competitive advantages, their growth projections. I was prepared for anything except the man who walked into that conference room. David Marshall was everything I expected from his LinkedIn profile: tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. What I hadn't expected was the way he looked at me, like I was already a disappointment before I'd even opened my mouth. "Miss Thompson," he said, barely glancing at my resume, "tell me why you think you're qualified for a senior consultant position." I launched into my prepared response about market analysis, strategic planning, and my thesis on operational efficiency. He interrupted me halfway through. "That's all very textbook," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But consulting isn't about what you learned in school. It's about commanding respect from clients, many of whom are seasoned executives who've been in business longer than you've been alive." I felt my cheeks flush, but kept my voice steady. "I understand that experience is valuable, but I believe fresh perspectives can also bring significant value to problem solving." He actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a genuine laugh that made my stomach drop. "Fresh perspectives, Miss Thompson, our clients pay us premium rates because they trust our judgment. They need to see someone who looks like they've been around the block, not someone who looks like they should be fetching coffee." The room fell silent. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "Are you suggesting that my appearance somehow affects my ability to analyze business problems?" "I'm saying that image matters in this business. When I send a consultant to represent Marshall & Associates, they need to embody the gravitas our clients expect. You're young. You're..." He paused, looking me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're just not what our clients are looking for in a senior position." I had prepared for difficult questions about my experience, my skills, my knowledge. I hadn't prepared for this. "Perhaps you'd be better suited for an entry-level position," he continued. "We have openings in our research department. It would be a good place for someone like you to learn the ropes." Someone like me? The words echoed in my head as I sat there, feeling smaller by the second. I thought about my professors who had praised my analytical skills, my internship supervisors who had written glowing recommendations, my classmates who had voted me most likely to succeed. None of that mattered to the man sitting across from me. "I'm not interested in an entry-level position," I said quietly. "I have the qualifications for the role I applied for." His expression hardened. "Miss Thompson, I've been in this business for 20 years. I know talent when I see it, and I know when someone is reaching beyond their capabilities. Take the research position or look elsewhere." I stood up, my legs shaking slightly. "I'll look elsewhere." As I gathered my things, he called out one final insult disguised as advice. "Word of advice: the business world isn't like school. It's not about who has the best grades or the most impressive thesis. It's about who can command respect from day one. You might want to consider that before your next interview. I walked out of that office with my head held high, but the moment I reached my car, I broke down. Not just from the rejection, but from the way he'd made me feel small, insignificant. Like all my hard work and achievements meant nothing because I didn't fit his narrow definition of what a consultant should look like. The drive home was a blur of tears and anger. I replayed the conversation over and over, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the ways I could have defended myself. But deep down, I knew that nothing I could have said would have changed his mind. He had decided who I was the moment I walked into that room. That night, I called my best friend Marcus, who had been my study partner throughout business school. He was working at a startup in Silicon Valley, and I needed to hear a friendly voice. He said, "What?" Marcus's voice crackled through the phone, his outrage clear even through the poor connection. He basically told me I looked too young and inexperienced to be taken seriously by clients, I said, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine that I'd been nursing for an hour. That's discrimination, Sophia. You could probably sue him. With what money and what evidence? He was careful not to say anything explicitly illegal. He just made it clear that I wasn't the right fit for their company culture. So what are you going to do? I stared out my apartment window at the city lights, feeling lost and defeated. I don't know. Keep looking, I guess. Prove him wrong. But as the weeks turned into months, proving him wrong became increasingly difficult. I applied to dozens of consulting firms, investment banks, and corporate strategy departments. Some interviews went well, others didn't, but none resulted in offers. I started to wonder if David Marshall had been right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this world. The breakthrough came 6 months later, in the most unexpected way. I was working a temporary job at a tech startup called Innovate Tech, doing basic market research while I continued my job search. The company was small, maybe 30 employees, but they were working on something interesting, a software platform that could analyze supply chain inefficiencies in real time. The CEO, a brilliant but scattered engineer named Jake Morrison, was struggling to secure funding. He had the technical vision but couldn't translate it into business terms that investors would understand. I watched him bomb presentation after presentation, fumbling through financial projections and market analysis. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Jake," I said after another disastrous pitch to a group of potential investors, "can I make a suggestion?" He looked up from his laptop, frustrated and exhausted. "At this point, I'll take suggestions from anyone. Let me help you with your next presentation. I think I can help you frame your technology in terms that investors will connect with." He was skeptical at first, but he was also desperate. We spent the next 2 weeks completely overhauling his approach. Instead of leading with technical specifications, we started with the problem. Supply chain inefficiencies cost companies billions of dollars annually. Then we showed how his software could solve that problem, with concrete examples and projected ROI. The difference was night and day. In our first presentation with the new approach, we secured a $2 million Series A round. Jake was ecstatic. "Sophia, you just saved my company," he said after the investors left. "How did you know exactly what they wanted to hear?" "This is what I was trained to do," I said. "I just never got the chance to do it." That's when he made me an offer that changed everything. "Come work for me. Not as a temp, but as my chief strategy officer. I can't pay you much right now, but I can offer you equity. Help me build this company." I thought about David Marshall's words about someone like me not being executive material. Here was Jake, offering me exactly the kind of senior position I'd been fighting for. The salary was lower than what I'd hoped for, but the equity stake was substantial. If the company succeeded, I would be rewarded accordingly. "I accept," I said without hesitation. The next 3 years were a whirlwind of 18-hour days, endless cups of coffee, and the kind of learning experience that no MBA program could provide. I wore every hat imaginable: strategic planner, business developer, HR coordinator, and occasionally even customer service representative. But I was building something from the ground up, and every success felt personal. Innovate Tech's software platform was gaining traction. We landed major clients like Walmart, Amazon, and Target, helping them optimize their supply chains and reduce costs. Our client roster grew, our revenue increased, and we started getting attention from larger companies who wanted to partner with us. That's when I had the idea that would change everything. I was reviewing our client portfolio when I noticed something interesting. Many of our biggest clients were also clients of consulting firms, including Marshall & Associates. They were paying consultants huge fees to identify supply chain inefficiencies, then paying us to fix them. Why not eliminate the middleman? Jake, I said, walking into his office with a proposal that had been keeping me awake for weeks. What if we expanded beyond software? What if we became a full-service consulting firm? He looked up from his code, intrigued. What do you mean? We already have the technology to identify problems. We have the relationships with major corporations. What if we started offering strategic consulting services to go along with our software solutions? The more we talked about it, the more excited we both became. We had something that traditional consulting firms didn't: data-driven insights backed by real-time technology. We could offer clients not just recommendations, but immediate implementation tools. Within 6 months, we had launched Innovate Tech Consulting. I recruited a team of brilliant analysts, many of whom had been overlooked by traditional firms for reasons similar to my own experience. We were young, diverse, and hungry. We were also incredibly effective. Our first major consulting engagement was with a Fortune 500 retailer who was struggling with inventory management. The project was worth $5 million, and we delivered results that exceeded their expectations. Word spread quickly through the industry. But I wasn't satisfied with just building a successful company. I wanted to build an empire. I wanted to create something so significant that people like David Marshall would have no choice but to take notice. The opportunity came when Jake decided he wanted to step back from the business side and focus on product development. Sophia, he said one evening as we worked late in the office, I think it's time for you to take the lead on this. You're the one with the vision for where we're going. He offered to make me CEO, with a significant increase in my equity stake. I accepted, knowing that this was my chance to build something truly special. Under my leadership, Innovate Tech Consulting grew aggressively. We acquired smaller firms, recruited top talent, and expanded our service offerings. We weren't just a consulting firm anymore. We were a comprehensive business solutions provider. We rebranded as Phoenix Dynamics, symbolizing our rise from the ashes of conventional thinking. The irony wasn't lost on me. Phoenix Dynamics was becoming exactly the kind of company that David Marshall thought I could never be part of at a senior level. We were landing the same clients, competing for the same contracts, and consistently outperforming traditional firms. But my real moment of satisfaction came when I learned that Marshall & Associates was struggling. The consulting industry was changing, and firms that couldn't adapt were being left behind. Clients wanted technology-driven solutions, not just strategic advice. They wanted partners who could implement changes, not just recommend them. Marshall & Associates was hemorrhaging clients. Their revenue was down 40% from the previous year. And they were facing pressure from creditors. David Marshall's old-school approach was becoming obsolete in a world that demanded innovation and results. That's when I made my move. I had been tracking Marshall & Associates' financial situation for months, waiting for the right moment. When I learned they were considering selling the company, I knew this was my chance for the ultimate vindication. I want to buy Marshall & Associates, I told my investment banker during a meeting in my corner office, the same office where I now employed over 200 people. He raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? They're not performing well, and frankly, their client base overlaps significantly with yours. Sometimes business decisions aren't just about financial returns, I said. Sometimes they're about closing circles. The acquisition process took 6 months. Marshall & Associates was desperate enough to accept our offer, which was generous given their financial situation. But I made sure that the terms included one non-negotiable condition. I would personally oversee the integration process, including individual meetings with all senior staff. Which brought me to this moment. sitting across from David Marshall in the same conference room where he had dismissed me 5 years earlier. The irony was perfect. "I'm sure you have questions about the acquisition," I said, keeping my voice professional as I reviewed the integration plans. "I want to assure you that we value the experience and relationships that Marshall and Associates brings to Phoenix Dynamics." He was trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the recognition dawning in his eyes. "Miss Thompson, is it? Have we met before?" "We have," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "I interviewed here about 5 years ago for a senior consultant position." The color drained from his face. I could see him trying to remember, trying to place me among what were probably hundreds of interviews he had conducted over the years. "I'm afraid I don't recall the specific interview," he said carefully. "That's understandable," I replied. "You told me I wasn't executive material. You said I lacked the gravitas that your clients expected. You suggested I might be better suited for an entry-level research position." The silence that followed was deafening. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. "You also told me that the business world wasn't like school," I continued. "That it wasn't about who had the best grades or the most impressive thesis. It was about who could command respect from day one." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I thought about that conversation a lot over the years," I said. "It motivated me to prove you wrong. And now, 5 years later, I'm in a position to evaluate whether you're the right fit for Phoenix Dynamics." The tables had completely turned. The man who had once held all the power in this room was now at my mercy, and we both knew it. "Miss Thompson," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. If I said anything inappropriate during that interview, I apologize. I certainly didn't mean to discourage you from pursuing your career goals." "Oh, you didn't discourage me," I said. "You inspired me. You showed me exactly what I was fighting against. And now, thanks to that motivation, I'm in a position to offer you the same choice you offered me. Adapt to our way of doing business. Or, look elsewhere." I could see him processing the situation, understanding that his career was now in my hands. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "What would you need from me to make this transition successful?" he asked. I had prepared for this moment for years, but now that it was here, I felt something unexpected, not just satisfaction, but genuine professional consideration. Despite everything he had put me through, he did have valuable experience and client relationships. Phoenix Dynamics could benefit from his knowledge, as long as he was willing to work within our culture of respect and innovation. "I need you to understand that Phoenix Dynamics operates differently than traditional consulting firms," I said. "We value results over appearances, innovation over tradition. And we treat all our employees with respect regardless of their age, background, or any other characteristic that doesn't affect their ability to do the job." He nodded quickly, perhaps too quickly. "I also need you to understand that I expect the same level of professionalism from you that I expect from all our senior staff. That means treating everyone with dignity, supporting your colleagues, and focusing on what truly matters, delivering exceptional results for our clients." "Of course," he said. "I understand completely." I studied his face, trying to gauge his sincerity. Part of me wanted to reject him the way he had rejected me, to give him a taste of his own medicine. But I realized that would make me no better than he was. Phoenix Dynamics had succeeded because we focused on merit and results, not personal vendettas. "There is one more thing," I said. "I want you to know that your past behavior toward job candidates has been noted. Going forward, you'll be participating in our diversity and inclusion training program. You'll also be working with our HR department to ensure that our hiring practices reflect our values." He looked like he wanted to object, but he simply nodded. "Very well," I said, standing up and extending my hand. "Welcome to Phoenix Dynamics, Mr. Marshall. I look forward to seeing what you can contribute to our continued success." As we shook hands, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't expected. Genuine respect, not the condescending acknowledgement he might have given to a subordinate. but the kind of respect that one professional gives to another who has earned their position through merit and achievement. The next few months were a fascinating study in personal transformation. David Marshall, stripped of his old power structure and forced to prove himself in a merit-based environment, turned out to be a more effective consultant than I had given him credit for. He brought in several major clients, adapted to our technology-driven approach, and even became an advocate for our innovative hiring practices. But the real transformation was in me. I had spent 5 years driven by the need to prove him wrong, to show that I was everything he said I wasn't. In the process, I had built something extraordinary. A company that was changing the way business consulting worked, that was creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked by traditional firms, and that was delivering unprecedented results for our clients. The revenge I had imagined was sweet, but the reality was even better. I hadn't just proven David Marshall wrong, I had built something that made his original judgment irrelevant. Phoenix Dynamics was successful not because I had defeated him, but because I had created something better than what he represented. A year after the acquisition, I was invited to speak at a business leadership conference. The topic was Breaking Barriers in Corporate America. And I found myself on a panel with other executives who had overcome significant obstacles to reach leadership positions. What would you say to someone who's facing discrimination in their job search? Asked an audience member. I thought about that question for a moment, remembering the young woman I'd been 5 years earlier, sitting in my car outside Marshall & Associates, crying and wondering if I was good enough for the business world. I would say that other people's limitations are not your limitations, I replied. When someone tells you that you're not qualified or that you don't fit their image of what a leader should look like, they're revealing their own biases, not your potential. Use that rejection as fuel to build something better. But what if you don't have the resources or connections to start your own company? The audience member pressed. Then find the people who do share your vision, I said. Look for companies that value merit over tradition, innovation over convention. They're out there, and they're often the ones that are changing their industries. Don't waste your time trying to fit into systems that don't want you. Build new systems that do. After the conference, I received dozens of emails from young professionals who had faced similar challenges. Many of them were now working at Phoenix Dynamics, contributing to our continued growth and success. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source, David Marshall himself. Sophia, he wrote in an email that I received the day after the conference. I watched your presentation online, and I wanted to thank you, not just for giving me a second chance at Phoenix Dynamics, but for showing me what real leadership looks like. I've learned more about business in the past year working for you than I learned in the previous decade running my own firm. You've made me a better consultant and a better person. I read that email several times, feeling a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. The young woman who had been rejected from Marshall & Associates would never have imagined that the man who dismissed her would one day be thanking her for the opportunity to learn from her. But that's the thing about revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about defeating your enemies. Sometimes it's about succeeding so completely that your enemies become your allies. And your success becomes their success too. Today, Phoenix Dynamics employs over 500 people across 12 offices. We've been recognized as one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the country. And our technology platform is used by thousands of companies worldwide. We've created a culture where people are valued for their contributions, not their appearances or backgrounds. David Marshall is now one of our most successful senior consultants, and he's become a mentor to many of our younger employees. He often tells them the story of how he once rejected their CEO for a job, and how that rejection led to the creation of the company they now work for. The moral of the story, he says, is that you never know who you're talking to. The person you underestimate today might be your boss tomorrow. But I think the real moral is different. It's not about who you're talking to. It's about who you choose to become. When someone tells you that you're not good enough, you have a choice. You can accept their judgment and let it define you, or you can use it as motivation to prove them wrong. I chose the latter. And it led me to build something I never could have imagined when I was sitting in that conference room 5 years ago, being told I wasn't executive material. The champagne still tastes like victory, But now it tastes like something else too. The satisfaction of knowing that I didn't just succeed despite David Marshall's rejection. I succeeded because of it. He gave me the greatest gift he could have given me, even though he didn't know it at the time, the motivation to prove him wrong. And in the end, that's exactly what I did.